Classical art forms are like vast oceans. A dip in its pristine waters, and you will be swimming in it till eternity. It's a work of a lifetime, and for some, many lifetimes. Have you ever watched a beautiful performance and wondered what must be going in to be able to perform at that level of excellence? Clearly, we all know the response is Riyaaz. Do you think the word Riyaaz can be confined to the word practice? To me, it has way more connotations and references. Don't you wish they told you what exactly they do when they say, "Hum Riyaaz karte hain"? Well, these are the questions that intrigued me, and I decided to get some answers. Not to keep them with me, but to share with the world at large the vision of these artists, their secrets. Hence the series
Raaz Riyaaz Ka.
So I think the important thing is that I'm so grateful to my training that nothing was kept away from me because I was too young. As many dancers would know, my world completely exists in this concept, this world of Shringaram, right? And I have so much conviction in it that I don't even feel I need to think of Shringara Bhakti as an idea. I trust so much by immersing myself in Shringaram that I have the potential to land in a place of Bhakti. So that has that possibility. But for as long as I can remember, long before my face or my emotional intelligence had the capacity to facilitate, articulate the demands of a Tanja Quartet Varnam, I was performing them on stage. And it's interesting to see all my early reviews that actually as a Margam was quite heavy Abhinaya voice, but that would only talk about my Nritta. Right? But still, my Guru Lakshman sir still ensured that I was performing these pieces.
Correct.
And what happens then is, it's so beautiful that, you know, when your body is Superman, right? There's a point when everything that the world thinks is wonderful about your body starts to lose itself. I've experienced this in Bharata Natyam, I've experienced it in ballet, right? My potential to jump high, my potential to have multiple turns. In ballet, I was a very unusual male dancer because I had very high extensions, which was unusual at that time. All those things in my late 30s were the first things to go. But because I was given the space to have already started the work in this other layering of Abhinaya, I was ready then, my body was ready to pass on to the next exploration. And that I'm so grateful, because I didn't start getting into Abhinaya later. I started very young, actually.
So it kind of started, it was like a marination.
Absolutely.
That happened.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. It's a marination that happens. When you're in your 40s, by that point, as I said, there's a conviction in terms of what you want to say as an artist, right? And I am a huge believer that my role, my responsibility is to create an experience for the audiences to be able to engage with their stories, which means that I have to find a truth that is mine. So the work becomes, as I said, highly autobiographical, but not for it to be about my story.
So the same Varnam you see different people do has to tell a different story.
It's a different story through my story.
Correct.
Right? So what I mean by that is, let's take Saki in the Jalam, let's say, in the Velayil, Ananda Bhairavi, right? I grew up watching Malavika Sarukai do this one. She was my idol. The way she kind of explored the majesty of Ananda Bhairavi, the way she explored that particular relationship between majestic Shringaram, right, and the language, the Tamil language of, you know, that very beautiful nuance of, you know, Vadi, Podi, you know, all those kinds of things, right, with that majesty of the Shringaram. But by the time I was in my 40s, I was able to find what Mavin has to say about it. How does Mavin articulate this concept of majesty in love and desire? How does Mavin find the experience of Mugdha, right, through Mavin's experiences? Again, not for the piece to become about Mavin, but for Mavin to be able to access a point that is so honest because it's lived, that it creates a space in the theatre that audiences start to see their stories, you know. And one of the things that I'm particularly demanding when I coach, Prachi, is I always say to the dancers, it's very important that you have absolutely no expectations that the audience is going to understand what you're doing. Right? So I can go into so many details, right, of metaphors, not for them to understand what each metaphor is, but for them to feel it. So when you feel something, sometimes you're not really understanding what you're feeling, but or why you're feeling it, but you're feeling it.
It's like when you watch something, it moves you and just, you don't know why you feel it.
Absolutely. Now, I might have to be so meticulous in the precision and the detail of it. But I use that precision and detail and being so meticulous just purely so that it unravels an experience.
So you are saying when you talk about Manodharma, there is a technique that you work on to kind of reach, which you've spoken about a little earlier.
Yes, and also Prachi,
you have to,
it is a technique. It is a technique how not to be indulgent, right? And I also want to say one thing, Manodharma is a complex idea, because there are different perspectives to Manodharma, right? So you have the idea of a beautiful Swapna Sundari, right, who creates, you know, takes 2 lines, Chandravadana, and 45 minutes she will just create idea after idea and idea. I don't have that genius at all. What I have is somehow the capacity to look at a flower and the detail of what that flower is can create a metaphor and metaphor and metaphor.
And make us see it through your
I hope
eyes.
will make you
we
feel something, you know. So I always use an example, you know, Ashtapadis are things, are pieces that I've danced my whole life, right? Especially initially as an Odissi student, and then I took them on so much as a Bharata Natyam artist. In Lalita Lavanga, which is the 3rd Ashtapadi, there's the verse at the beginning which is quite descriptive, but there's a beautiful word which says, after Jayadeva describes Radha walking in Vasanti, and then it says Kusuma, right, when she picks that he identifies a flower, and he says that flower has the fragility and the curves and the languor that represent the body of this.
Oh my God.
Now just that, if one is able to tap into what the color of that flower is, what is the nature of the petals that surround, which are the petals that are going out, which are the petals that are going in, what is the smell of that flower, how heavy is that flower, and how does that morphing, I would use morphing a lot, the morphing of that one petal lend itself to the limb here, that then resonates into a full physical experience that constructs this Radha. That is for me where
It's pure magic. It's pure magic.
That's what I'm invested in. That's what I'm interested in, and that for me is Manodharma. Because I've created micro details within that one idea of a flower.
Which to anyone is just this.
Exactly.
From this to you've just kind of.
And I always say, you know, as children, right, we learn theory is an interesting thing because we learn theory and we learn to memorize it and we just say it. But that simple yato hasta tato drishti is so complex.
So potent.
It's so difficult actually. There's always about 35% more of a focusing of energy that we don't use enough.
The detailing
The
of
detailing and the pleasure in experiencing or exploring or failing in the details. In the details.
and enjoying that process
Oh,
rather
it's
than making it
amazing.
more like, oh, I have to do
It's amazing. It's like, you know, and you find it even like I recently did a lecture demonstration and I just recapped a very old Jatiswaram in Varali that Lakshman sir taught me. And I'm quite obsessive. I'm quite an obsessive personality. And the just the Pallavi line of that Varali Jatiswaram, I just became so obsessed with that. Nida pamaga, nida pamaga, ga, 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 ga. It's the way that ga resonates in that Varali. It's so beautiful.
It offers so many possibilities.
So many possibilities, right? And I remember when he used to sing, right? Now when I think about it, Nida pamaga, that ga, it would sit still in time. And I now when I think about it, that when he used to just sit on that ga, you'd feel the Bani, the Gharana of Budalu, Krishnamurti, Tiger Vardacharya, Mysore Vasudevacharya, Papnashim, all his teachers trickle down. Ga.
Oh my God.
You know,
Like a micro
it's a
representation
micro.
of that whole macro.
And I've become quite obsessed with this concept of micro and macro.
At the same time.
Yeah, and macro, micro. So that's why, you know, taking a Varnam, like recently I did Rupa Mujuchi as an Abhinaya piece. That whole concept of Shiva as form and yet no form is amazing. Now, when I'm dancing, is it about me showing hands that is going to no one is going to get it. Who's going to get it? No hand can define that. But how do I facilitate a structure that's going to be even possible to potentially create a space that people can experience some sense of this ambiguity of form and no form? The mysticism of that, the austerity of that. You know, when I'm dancing Shiva, it's very interesting. What do I want the audience to feel? Right? If I'm dancing Mohamana, what do I want them to feel? I want to ask myself, if I'm dancing a Varnam like Sami Niram Manave, what do I want them to feel? Right? Mohamana, for me, I want them to smell the Vibhuti. I want them to feel the tension of someone feeling desire with Vibhuti. That austerity and desire at the same space. Right? So everything is about all the details, all the precision, all the research, all the understanding who Tyagesha is, what Tiruvarur is, the history of that Varnam, all of it, which I do a lot. It's not for me to tell the audience I know all of this. It's purely there to facilitate an experience where they can smell the Vibhuti.
It's distilled to such a micro aspect.
Yeah. That's what I hope for, at least. That's the process. Yeah.
I mean, and we also talk about these very lofty ideas like immersion and surrender, which to us seems like, okay, how do we achieve this surrender and immersion? So what is the way to kind of move towards these ideas?
I mean, I think you just said it just now. They're very lofty ideas, which sometimes I have to say I'm always a bit resistant to talk about because it's easier to talk about them, right? And I think
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so.
And it's a bit of a gift and a curse, the fact that we come from a culture that is so philosophically sophisticated, because it's so easy to theorize and talk about it. Anandam, is so complex. Sachidanandam is so complex. We can talk about it, we can read about it, we can theorize about it. How do we show it? Right? How do I show surrender? I can't. But what I think I can do is I can try in some way to create a structure, to create a ritual that will land me there. Ritual is a very important concept.
In fact, here I want to interject and talk about your exhaustion
Yeah.
theory. Is that also a part of this ritual?
Yeah.
Did it feature in that?
Yeah, you see, I think a lot. So this is where, right, as your kind of identity, your history as a person, can start to inform so much in terms of the choices that you make. Have always been, but have become increasingly so, a proclaimed, loud and proud child of Mother Kali. So my relationship, my experience of just this sense of God, goddess, mother, presence, is very much from that life. And I want to say something that's specific, Prachi, because it's a very Malaysian perspective. Why I say it's a very Malaysian perspective is, as a Malaysian, our history in terms of migration is working class. So Devi for us is not a Vedic concept. It's not a Puranic concept. It's not an intellectual concept. It's a lived in the earth, soil, trance, physical idea, right? So I grew up in a culture that in order to walk towards God, you had to break. Yeah, it was not about chanting, it was not about thinking. You climbed up those stairs, you carried something, right? You pierced yourself. That's the culture that I come from, right? You land in that place of bhakti, right? And so as a dancer, if I talk about bhakti, right, I remember very interestingly dancing a Varnam, Sami ki Sariyavare, which is on a Raja. And because the structure was so demanding, even though it had nothing to do with God, by the second half there was such a sense of transcendence, right, that I realized actually the point was not whether the Varnam is about a Shiva or Krishna or whatever to feel this godliness. It was about the body being broken, right? So I've come to a place for me that my process is about trusting 2 points. That as a classical dancer, it's always important psychologically, whether you like it or not, that the audience has to trust that you know what you're doing. So there's a particular period through the kacheri, through the margam, that I have to surrender to the prescriptions of what is required of me, arguably superficially or not, from as a classical dancer. Because that's where the audience will trust that I know my stuff.
Trust building has happened.
Yes.
Now
Once they trust, then you have a responsibility. They've given you their hands.
they've opened themselves.
Then you can go anywhere with them, right? And for me, what I try to do is I try to push myself to what I call a point of the threshold. You might think it's just physical. Actually, sometimes it's even in Abhinaya concerts it's happened. There's such an energy build that something breaks. That point of breaking is the most precious because it's the most honest. There's no more constructed idea of Mavin the dancer. There's no more showing. There's no more showing off. There's nothing in control. Many times in my head, or if you're close enough, you literally might hear me saying, please help me finish this. Literally, because my knees would feel like this, right? Or even emotionally. That's the point that has the potential for something.
Magic.
Yeah. And it's nothing that I can say, I can tell you physically that is there or visually. It's just thing that has the potential to land. And I guess that's what I'm searching for, which is scary because sometimes it doesn't come.
Yeah, but that's the beauty again of it, like the whole seeking.
Yeah,
you
but the
know.
seeking is real.
Yeah.
It's not intellectual.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not telling you. I'm not going to tell you that I'm this. It's real. I'm really seeking, and there's such a beauty in that honesty. You know, the beauty I think as classical dancers is when we can start to embrace everything that is the contradiction of what we're training for. Perfection, being effortless. When you start to explore what effort is, it's stunning.
Correct.
It's stunning. When the audience...
And that is for the audience to
Absolutely,
say.
yes.
It
When the
cannot
audience
be,
starts to
yeah.
feel you fight for something, it's real, it's live.
Correct.
They're not just watching you.
True.
And that's the exciting part.
So in fact recently I watched Maithili's She's Auspicious,
Yes.
and she mentioned your name at the end in the conversation.
okay.
And because what I observed was she went through that intense emotion where we were almost awestruck and dumbfounded. We didn't have words to speak. And she just snapped out of it and she was like, okay, we are ready for the conversation. And she said this is a technique she's learned from you, because I kept thinking to myself that how will she go on day in and day out rehearsing a piece and performing a piece as heavy as this? What does it do to her mental health? And then would you like to talk a little bit about...
Well, it's a technique I learned from someone as well, because I as you know, I'm quite immersive dancer. Interestingly, I learned it from a dancer who was a contemporary dancer. And a lot of the works that I've danced in contemporary dance have always been very emotional works.
Absolutely.
And usually duet works, and they're quite...
like Man or God? I mean, after
Man
a
or God is
piece
very
like
emotional,
that,
yes.
How do you kind of
Yeah.
come out of it, sustain it?
Yeah. It's from a dancer called Atanasia, who was a dancer with Pina Bausch for many years, who equally makes very heavy and loaded work. It sounds more simple than it is, but she'd make me do the full run, and I would be, quite like this. And two things would happen. In my head, my ego, I would almost think that I would have to carry on that emotion and feel the full trauma of it to be an artist. That's my ego talking.
True.
It's
Because
n-
then you might feel like, oh, that was all fake what he did, because
Exactly.
he's out of it so quickly.
Exactly. So that was the first thing that I had to navigate, let go of my ego. The second thing that she really literally used to do was, okay, Mavin, she'd just go, well done, okay, we'll take notes in 5 minutes, and then she'd go like this, okay, now 1, 2, 3, snap out of it. And she would literally say, now immediately this 5 minutes, I want you to just go outside, have a cigarette, or just completely, like you break it open. And for me, that was a technique that I've really used till now, because I'm that kind of dancer that can basically fall into it, and it's really beautiful when you're able to learn from artists who have equally understood and found a technique that is safe, that works, that is efficient. So as I said, it's a technique. All these things are techniques.
Yes.
Because the danger as well when you get so immersed like that is it becomes indulgent. You become so in your own world, and the question many times, but sometimes I ask dancers, how did you feel about it, right? Because actually many times when you feel so good about it, it's not what the audience is feeling.
And then the vice versa as well.
Right. So this ability to be able to cut off has been very, to be honest, very important in terms of my emotional health. Because I do have the capacity to take something so extreme and draw it
it
into.
can really impact your, because
And it has in my 30s. I have gone through that. as well, tremendously. It took me a long time to understand that, and I guess that's the beauty when you're able to find something or someone teaches you something, that you have the capacity then to share it with another dancer if they want to take it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that brings me to the next point of mentoring. So there are a lot of misconceptions, especially in the classical dance world and especially in India, I would say, because I know it's a very common concept out of India. I want you to really dissect this word and throw more light on what it actually means, what it entails, and how good or not good, whatever your views are about mentoring for the young dancers.
So I think there are several things that I think are challenging when we try to appropriate or adopt these roles that have been constructed very specifically by kind of Western culture, right? Similarly, dramaturg is a problematic word,
Yes.
right? I think choreographer is a problematic word. A choreographer is a Western concept. In Bharata Natyam, I don't think of what we do as choreography at all, right? One has to remember that in the West, the history of theatre has a separation between theatre, dance and music. Historically, we don't have that.
In fact, we kind of tend to club it all.
We as artists, ideally, are the coming together of theatre, dance and music.
Correct.
Right? So choreography in itself is a problematic idea, right? And many times for me, the problem when I've seen dance trying to facilitate notions of choreography, what they're actually trying to do is imbibe Western notions of crafting of choreography onto Indian classical dance. So on many levels I have issues with this. Politically, colonialism is a very, very present concept that still exists, right? And I say this as someone who lives in the West, right? Similarly, having had the tremendous privilege, right, of working very closely through Akram with one of probably one of the world's best dramaturgs ever, Ruth Little, right? I find it very problematic, this idea of people assuming this role of being dramaturgs in India, because if you don't really understand what that concept is and you're just using the word based on what you may or may not be aware of or have seen, it's actually quite limiting to where the work can go.
True.
Right? So that is another challenging part. A mentor, again, from my perspective, and I will say this because many people ask me to be a mentor, right, is really someone who is there to completely have a sense of an objective overview, which is very important for any artist to
Absolutely.
to be able to receive. But most importantly, a mentor is not someone who decides they're going to mentor. A mentor is someone who someone may come and ask if they can have some support, right? So I never assume that people even want to know what my thoughts are. That's the first thing, right? But that objectivity, and in many ways, I would say a very conducive, not too much time with the artist actually, because that makes you lose the objectivity in some way, is crucial.
Like not emotionally.
Yeah,
get
it
you
has to
involved.
be super objective when you're a mentor, I think, which means you actually can't access too much time. It doesn't give you the space then to actually be able to give objective feedback
True.
enough. So that is my my history in terms of mentoring. But I think as I said, it's often confused sometimes with reclaiming the role of a teacher.
Which it is not actually.
Well, even between being a teacher and a coach is even two different things as well.
Like these are independent words, but they get mixed and
Absolutely.
misassociated,
Absolutely,
appropriated
absolutely.
most
And
of the
sometimes I kind of think, you have to think all these roles, right? Dramaturg, mentor, coach, rehearsal directors, genuinely are roles, names that have been constructed for the purpose of systems it might seem weird for me to say this, but there is such a beauty in the non-existence of systems in India. And sometimes I wish we would trust just the capacity for artist to engage and define the relationships between
like, why
them.
tag them with these labels or
Yeah,
whatever? Like,
if a young
dancer,
dancer, absolutely, if a young dancer wants to come up to me and ask me for an objective this thing, and if I feel I have something to contribute, let us find our own relationship. And all of this, I think, is coming in this kind of attempt to systemize in the name of progression of creativity and arts. But where I find it challenging is it's being done with a kind of pseudo systemized appropriated version of what they think the West is doing so well, which I can tell you is many things are not so good actually, that I've been talking about, is the manner in which that young dancers have taken up a sense of ownership in terms of performance opportunities, performance spaces, opening their spaces out for performances, supporting each other. That is tremendously beautiful.
Yes.
It's so beautiful, and I wish things like that would become the point of focus in terms of how can we develop this more. Instead of all these things that we are doing in the West that actually are not applicable here necessarily, and are not even being done very well in the West anyway.
Wow, I think there is so much we've spoken, and I think if you give me a chance, I'll be sitting here for another 3 hours.
We can sit here for another 3 hours.
But I think I have to find a moment where we need to wind this, and I
Sure.
think this episode is definitely going to go in like 2 sections. But I just wanted to ask one quick question
Yeah.
about, do you have a ritual on the day of a performance?
I do have a ritual. Yes, I do have a ritual on the day of a performance. Okay, so it depends on what the performance is. It's very interesting. When I'm dancing a Margam, I'm very strict with myself on many levels because in my head it's all psychology, right? All of this is psychological. So I want if I share with you very intimately my inner thoughts, I want my body to be very pure for the space. So things like observing being vegetarian is not natural to me. I'm very much a Malaysian, Chinese, Sri Lankan man in that sense. So on that day I don't eat any meat. Before the show, before I put on my makeup, I always have a turmeric bath to kind of cleanse my energy. And then, although I'm not someone who has a lot, I don't get dressed up a lot, even my makeup is quite minimal, I think, but I spend a lot of time with it, especially my eyes, because I just feel that my eyes is going to be my biggest window. So it's not about actually spending time in terms of how I draw it, but it's almost with an intention of looking after it, if that makes sense. And then I have a very psychological need to ensure that I really sweat a lot before I get into stage. My biggest fear is not being warm enough. So I warm up very intensely, and I do all the jatis of my Varnam.
Really?
Always, all the jatis. When I was younger, I used to do the full Varnam before the show. But now as I've got older, I've let that go. I do all the jatis, and I really sweat with my makeup, everything. And then I feel ready, and then I dab myself with my makeup. I just dab it, put on my costume, and then I have a very, very detailed ritual, which is I like to spray myself with perfume before I get on stage. Because I love the idea of entering the space smelling nice. It's very specific. When I'm doing Abhinaya,
Does the fragrance change, or is it one fragrance, like a particular fragrance?
it changes depending. It's just about smelling nice and smelling clean, actually.
Wow.
When I do Abhinaya concerts, because I do a lot of them now, chamber concerts, it's completely different. I eat a very big meal in the afternoon. I love to feel that balance of feeling slightly sleepy. So I feel almost languorous is the word I want to. There's a alasyam. There's a kind of. I allow myself to indulge in a lot of things, so that by the time I come for the concert, it's very languorous. Is the best way I can describe it. I'm not like this. It's very like this. Yeah.
And also kind of flow into
Yes.
it, like you glide into
It's
it.
completely a different. And I feel I'm not necessarily having a conversation with something bigger, with Abhinaya. When I do those concerts, I'm opening my diary, right? So it's a different kind of there's a real kind of like this. That's the best way I can describe it. Yeah.
So, I promise you, and I'm being absolutely honest, what we've spoken about is literally just half my questions. There were so many more, but I think due to the paucity of time and also being a little bit practical about timing, I'm forced to cut this conversation here. But we have a new segment added to Raaz Riyaaz Ka season 3, Anna, where we've invited all our viewers to send in questions. And 4 selected questions have a little surprise.
Okay.
So we have a question here for you from Mahalakshmi Prabhakar. So we would wind up with her question. She
Okay.
talks about Riyaz and mental health. And her question is, when artists go through lows, how does one trick their mind to do Riyaz? So how would you respond to that?
Oh, I don't think the key is to trick your mind at all. For me, the beauty has always been, the Riyaz has always been the thing that I've just done many times unhappily, right?
That's the truth.
And I think one thing that's very important I want to share is that I have found that if you love dance, if it's your life, you have to love the fact that you will hate it also. That is a real relationship. If you just like dancing all the time, I question how deep it is, right? And so you have to love and hate it. And particularly Riyaz, I would say 90% of the time you don't want to do it, but you have to,
True.
even for yourself, right? And then you realize after a point that it has got you through so much that life has offered, right?
Like it's your biggest anchor.
It is the
you would
only
say.
anchor that I've had in my life that has been stable. Nothing else, aside from my family, my parents and my brothers and my guru. Friends have come and gone, lovers have come and gone. Everyone that you think is going to be around, they come and go, but that has just remained with me. And I think, the thing is, don't expect from Riyaz to find pleasure in it in a literal sense. The pleasure is just in that it sits with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's so beautiful, that line.
yeah.
But yes, coming from that, we come to our fun section to lighten things a bit, because it will take some time to digest all of what Anna has shared with us. So we have this fun little round, which is
Right.
the rapid fire
I've
round.
heard this. Parshvanath was very good at this. I
Yeah.
don't know if I would be as clever as him.
I had a special section where he had to identify the dialogues from particular movies, and he did so well.
I'm sure,
He knew
yeah.
all of them. So this is going to be a quick one,
Yeah.
and we then conclude.
Yeah.
Your first love, ballet or Bharata Natyam?
Bharata Natyam. Yeah.
Your first tattoo and its significance, only if you wish to share.
Oh, my first tattoo was on the left here. I have a line that goes this way, and it symbolizes Devi. So I think of Devi as this line and Shiva as a line like this. But this was the first one that I did, and really from there I was convinced to kind of accumulate that idea through my body.
Beautiful. I always wanted to know that. I'm so glad you answered that. Riyaz in the morning, Riyaz in the evening.
Definitely by force in the morning. I would love to in the evening.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Performance in a proscenium or a chamber concert?
Definitely chamber concert.
That came even before I could complete the question. Next favorite classical dance style after Bharatanatyam? Assuming Bharatanatyam is your most favorite.
Well, ballet, obviously, which I do a lot, but also
Maybe in the Indian classical dance
I would have
styles?
loved to have been a Kuchipudi dancer.
Really?
Yes, I think I would have suited Kuchipudi a lot.
Anna, knowing you, I think most of them you would have done really well.
Oh, yeah, Kuchipudi.
Okay, last movie you watched in the theatre?
Oh, in the theatre, wow, I haven't been to the cinema in a long time. I think it was something very, so there's a side, okay, I'm being apologetic now. There's a side of me that is very, very not serious, which I love, right?
great.
So I think it would have been something like Sex and the City or something like that, like something that's very me as well. That's another side of me, yeah.
Lovely. Your most favorite part of the Bharatanatyam Aharyam?
I would say just the belt that I have, because it's so simple and yeah.
If you were stranded on an island, the two things you wish to have with you other than food and water.
An iPod, because music I need all the time, and my bells.
Wow. Have you ever fallen asleep while watching a performance?
Yes, of course. Loads.
Your favorite ragam?
Oh, I have a lot. But at the moment, it's Purvi Kalyani.
I like that at the moment.
Yeah.
One aspect of your dance which you feel you've never practiced enough.
Huh. I'm quite a practicer, right? You know what I have not done enough, which I want to. I've not worked enough in Javlis.
Okay.
So it's not specific to a
Correct.
movement, but Javli it's a particular area that I want to. I've just not gone into it, considering I do so much abhinaya. Yeah.
Okay. Mountain or the ocean?
Ocean.
And last, your most memorable stage blunder.
Oh, so many.
One. We want to laugh.
I don't know if it's laughable. So I had to jump in the last minute because I have this capacity to learn things very quickly if need be.
I can imagine.
And so a dancer got injured, and it was a very big venue that we were with Akram. We were performing for a week in Avignon. So I had to jump in to dance his role, and I learned everything in one night. As I was doing the first part of the prologue, and Akram's counts are very hectic. You know, it's all like syncopated and everything. I was doing it, and I was getting it, and then at one point in my head, I went, "You've got this." In my head, just to, okay, you've got this, and then everything went. But everything went, and for the next 5 minutes, it was just like gone, and I just never forget that, because I basically I was just like a domino effect. That was quite traumatic for 5 minutes.
But it's nice to know that you're so open about it, and it's so nice to know that it happens to you as well.
Oh, but I think my shows is full of mistakes. Full. The beauty of performance is that it's live. I really want dancers to know that. The beauty is that it won't go right, but how you navigate those more points, that is your artistry. I went through a phase where I dated a lot of DJs. Don't ask me why. I dated a lot of DJs, which meant I started to really understand the art of DJing. People don't think of the art of DJing. And I remember one of them saying to me, a good DJ, because it's so psychological, understanding
The pulse.
it's not about what they play, because you know, music, especially club music, it's very seasonal, right? What's on the tracks and everything. But it's someone who understands when the mix goes wrong, how they're going to solve the problem. For me, that's a good artist who constantly has the capacity to navigate based off what's happening in the moment.
Wow. And I think on that really inspiring note, we take your leave. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you
for
so
being
much,
so
dear Prachi.
generous.
Thank
This
you
was
so much.
beautiful.
My
Thank you.
pleasure.
When one uses the word secret, one feels it's something that should not be shared. It should be guarded. But why should knowledge such as this be guarded and not shared? If shared, it will only result in making better and more dedicated artists, and that in turn will only benefit the art. We are fortunate to have such artists in the series Raaz Riyaaz Ka, who are breaking the notion of their Riyaaz being a Raaz.
राज रियाज का